Hello and welcome to another episode of Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers. And before we start, I want to say to all of you how much I am enjoying the process of getting to know you through the intro calls. This is just a wonderful experience for me, and I love the impact that all of this work is having. I love hearing back from you. It's warming my heart. And I also want to celebrate you because I do know it takes a lot of courage to reach out. And we spoke to courage in the last episode, so it fits. So for those of you who haven't been through the process, just to explain, if you want to be part of the women's circles that are coming up, the Reclaim Your Fullness women's circles that are coming up now in September, you need to go on the website. There's a link in the description and fill in the application form and then book in an intro call with me. Now that's totally free, but it is necessary to be admitted within the circles. That intro call, it's absolutely necessary, is part of your application. And I do know that it takes a lot of courage to actually take that step and book that call. I get that. I've been in that position so many times when reaching out to people I thought had something for me, like mentors and coaches, and reaching out and asking for support and help. That takes a lot because we're more used to, like our mothers, when we wanted help, when we needed help and we asked for it. Very often with a narcissistic mother, what happens is a put down. Maybe she even will help you eventually, but first she makes you pay for it. And so I get it is a very vulnerable thing to do. So I want to celebrate all of you that have actually done it, and at the same time I want to say to those that, because I know there are few that have filled in the application and then the intro call isn't booked, which is totally, I get it, I totally get it. So I want to say no judgment here, from a big space of love. I get you, I've been there. But also I've been the far side of that step, so I have taken that step, and I know the support that comes next is really valuable. I would not be here doing what I'm doing if I didn't receive that support, if I didn't take that step, if I didn't reach out, if I didn't apply for mentoring and coaching and women's circles along the way. I would not be here. So I hope this helps. And also remember that you can always reach out. You can send an email at matilde at womenreclaimingtheirfullness.me. I'm going to put the link in the description too. So if you have any questions before you fill in the application, before you book the free intro call, you can reach out and ask. And I'll do my best to support you the best I can. Okay. So that said, we're getting into the episode now. So the one thing to avoid if your mother is a narcissist. And actually, this is what we're going to speak about today, is one thing that is hardly helpful, even if your mother was perfect. But probably if your mother was perfect, you would be less inclined to do it. But definitely, it's very damaging to a system that has already been through a lot, like mine has and yours. So what is this thing that we should try and avoid at all costs? First of all, I want to ask you a couple of questions. I like just getting there eventually, but first question is, when you hear a woman speaking about her mother like she's her best friend, like the relationship with her mother is the best in the world, they hang out together, they do all these cool things together, how do you feel? How does that make you feel? And another question is, when you are on social media platforms and you're just scrolling down and you see women who made it. I mean, they healed everything, they have the perfect everything, they've done it all. How do you feel? How does that make you feel? Do you feel happy for them and just move on? Like, well done, you, genuinely? Like, or maybe do you feel like super inspired and you want to learn from these women? Or is that the same with the woman that says that her mother is her best friend? Do you feel happy that they have that relationship and that's it, that's the end of it, like then you just go on, move on with your life? Or do you feel inspired, you want to know how they did it? Or do you take their apparent success, and I'm going to say apparent because both with social media and both with how people speak about their relationships with their mother, you never know if that's true. We know how hard it is to actually say out loud that you don't have a good relationship with your mother, the fear of being judged that comes up for us. So we can assume that that can happen to other women too. So when they, let's say, brag or just say how wonderful it is, might be true, but it mightn't at the same time. And also we know that on social media, I mean, people put the best version of their life most of the time. So that's why I'm saying, do you take their apparent success as a measure of your failures? You see someone doing so good and there is that pang of, oh, they're doing like it's so much better than what I'm doing. I'm never going to be able to do that. It's all good for them, but it's just never going to happen to me. Blah, 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 blah. And my guess, knowing that you're here, you're listening to this, you've suffered from having a narcissistic mother. My guess is that that's what's happening. That we take the apparent success of others as a measure of our own failures, which in turn makes us feel even more like a failure than we already do. Now, if that's not your case, good for you. That's brilliant. Honestly, I love hearing when it's like, no, actually, you know what? That thing I really don't do. Well, that's awesome. But I know it has been my case for a very long time. Other women's success made me feel even more like a failure. It really blocked me, like seeing women that were doing good in life. And I'm talking about seeing women because the whole daughter of narcissistic mother, we're hardly going to become competitive towards men. We're hardly going to start measuring our success and failure with looking at what other men are doing. Maybe that's not your experience, but in my experience, and I know with many women I'm talking to, like, it's the difficulties in relating with other women. The relation with men, it's easier. It's a little less complicated. They're not a threat. We don't compete with them. I mean, that's it's a whole different aspect to it. So that's what we're talking about, women here. And what was happening to me is that when I saw a woman that was doing apparently better than me in whatever, that was successful, that was doing great, I ended up being very judgmental of these women and of their success. And I can still fall into that if I don't bring awareness to the pattern. It's like it's an habitual response, and there's a reason why that happens. So if you're feeling like maybe this is happening to me, we're gonna go into why that happens and to how to stop that and turn it into a helpful way of relating. So I want to get a little bit clear. What happens usually when we see someone, like someone bragging about the relationship with their mother, someone being successful at whatever or seeming successful at whatever, and this can take very little, because we as daughters of narcissistic mother, our self-esteem can be that low that actually can take very, very little for someone to seem better than us at something. Okay, so what happens is, at first, when you first come across someone like that, there can be like the admiration. There's a moment when we go, wow, that person is so this or so that, so amazing at whatever, and she says these amazing things and she does these amazing things. There's like a first, and this can last like a glimpse, or it can last like a longer time. We can get infatuated for like months even. Okay, but then the judgment comes in. And again, this can happen over mere seconds or over weeks, depending on how triggering the thing that this person is doing better than us is. Okay, and then we start going into, well, I thought she was such and such, but now she did that one thing, and now I see what she truly is, and we just go on, and it becomes a story of judgment. So what the hell happened in between the first reaction and what comes next? How do we go from admiring someone, even if it's for a brief moment, into being incredibly judgmental of that same person? Now, you could say that when it happens over a longer period of time, that you just got to know the person better. And that is true in some cases. So I'm not telling you that discernment is not important. Actually, I invite you to still bring discernment in any relationship with any person, men, women, doesn't matter. Discernment is important. But it's also true that often when this dynamic happens, there's a moment there where the success of another triggers the sense of inadequacy that we carry inside. And that sense of inadequacy is the result of how our mothers treated us growing up, of course. So we've been put down, we feel inadequate, we feel ashamed, we feel like we're not enough. And then there's this other bitch that is just awesome at everything. What's that about? Like, that happens. That's the reaction. Okay, if we could do shadow practices on this, if we're in a circle now and we did shadow practices on that, you would be quite amazed at what comes out. And that's okay. Like, there's no judgment here. That's just how it works. And so when we get that sense of inadequacy triggered, there's two options that we seem to have in front of us. One is you see someone that is so much better than you, and it makes you feel miserable. And you fall into a hole, feeling more inadequate, more worthless, and so on. Number two, you go on the attack, and you find faults in that person, and you better do it quickly. Can you see how that's saving you? Sometimes we do a bit of both. We feel that horrid inadequacy quite strongly, and then we attack. Sometimes we're suppressing that feeling altogether and attack straight away. So, as I said, I was doing this all the time, like genuinely chronic. I was taking down every woman that crossed my path. With the mother wounds I carried, I was constantly building women up. Like, there were certain women, and those were the ones that took it the hardest, because they were the ones I built up, I admire, and then I started to project all my insecurities onto them, put my mother face onto their face, like, of course, unconsciously. I didn't know I was doing that, and judge them until I felt perfectly justified in disliking them and move on. And others, I just was skipping the admiration part altogether. That was like a split second. Oh, she's better than me. Well, then let's kill. Never to their face, like, of course. I wasn't going to anyone's face saying terrible things, but I was doing it inside, or maybe with people that I knew I could speak to about this, that were in the same boat, and so they loved bitching about other women just as much. And some of you might be nodding at this, going, "Oh my, I do that." You know, does that make me a bad person? No. No, 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 no. It doesn't. It's not that. It's all you have been doing is actually implementing a protective strategy to survive. Because that feeling of inadequacy is horrible and no one wants to feel like that. And being a daughter of a narcissistic mother, you likely lived through a lot of put downs, either explicit or covert, subtle as they may have been. They still work on you, and we try to protect ourselves the best way we can. Because why wouldn't you do that? You know, when you don't know any better, when you're not fully aware of the mechanism, you don't know what's happening. And then everyone around us do it. I mean, how many women are judging other women all the time? It's really well accepted. It's actually way more accepted to be in a bunch of women and bitch about someone than to be in a bunch of women and say, well, I had a really difficult relationship with my mother and I feel like so inadequate and so not enough. Does that make sense? We don't do that. It's easier to bitch about other women. So no judgment here. Again, that's just how it works. And one of the way a narcissistic mother operates is comparing her child to others. And it is a behavior that doesn't necessarily stop as you become an adult. She probably still does that. Mine still does. And she compares, pointing out the faults you have and how others are so much better than you at whatever the topic is. And this can happen in many different ways. This can happen with your siblings. So if you have siblings, there is a point when it becomes clear you're not the favorite. Or maybe you're not the favorite on that particular aspect. It mightn't be an overall, but the comparison to siblings, or your sister does that so much better than you. Look at your sister and how she does whatever. Why can't you just do like that? Or blah, 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 blah. It could happen with friends you brought home. I've seen that. Oh my. That's terrible. When your mother was sweet as honey with them, with your friends, and then said things like, look how well your friend dresses, not like you. Maybe even with a smile. So your friend doesn't even get it. It seems like she's passing a compliment to your friend, but it's a put down for you, making you feel even more lonely because you would like to go to your friend and say, you see what my mom does? But your friend is like, what? Your mom is so lovely. I mean, she just told me I'm dressed nice. Well, no, she actually told me I'm dressed like shit. But so that's one of the dynamics. It could also happen with someone outside the family, like anyone on the streets. Like I've seen that happening in my family. It's like someone passes and they're like, my grandmother was more like that, but my mom can do that too. It's like, oh, look at that person. They don't even know that person, but they're like, oh, how wonderful it seems like she's doing whatever. And you're like, what? You don't even know that person? How can you compare that person to me? Or people on TV. Oh, look how good she's doing with her career. Unlike you. Or if only you were more like her. Or something like, could you not try to take a good look at that person or her and learn something? So these are all very they're like simple sentences. If you take one out of the whole picture, it's like, but like, I mean, is that enough to make you feel really inadequate? But you hear this day in, day out, all your childhood, all through your teens, all as you're growing up, every day, every time you pick up the phone, still now to ring your mother and to whatever, talk to her, she's using this put down, she's comparing you to others, and that keeps going. And another way she can compare, sometimes it can be involving her directly within the comparison. Something like, you clearly take nothing after me, otherwise you wouldn't be making these mistakes, or look how good I am at whatever. But why? And you're not. How is it possible that I haven't passed you any of the good genes? Okay, things like that. So being at the receiving end of all this from a very young age, it's not on. It's like suppresses your capacity to develop self-esteem. Like, it's a hard job to feel very good about yourself when your own mother clearly sees everyone else better than you. I know in my own experience I've had tons of that. Like, my mom was always doing that, but there was one particular aspect to her that it was interesting. Like, she never really spent much time with me or with my sister, but with us as children. She was always too busy, but she found plenty of time to near adopt, and I mean near adopt, other children from other women. Like, children she was teaching to and stuff. She was an instructor, so children were always around. But she went as far as declaring out loud at one point, it was like this golden boy that had become her adopted son, and that she was saying around that she only had a son, that boy was actually effectively her son, because if he felt like a son to her, he felt like the child she would have always wanted, dismissing completely the fact that she actually had two daughters. Like, she just was not speaking about us. She was pretending she didn't have daughters and that this child was her son. And she made sure she told us that. Like, she let us know that she was doing that. So that's extremely hurtful, and that's only one little thing. So when you've experienced this all the time, in all the different forms that it can take, it's quite understandable that we create strategies to protect ourselves from that hurt. And it's also very understandable that we're actually going around feeling like we're not enough, that we're inadequate, and that we're ashamed of what we are. So in the light of all this, we went around and we spoke a lot. So what is the one thing to avoid? Because we haven't gotten there yet. Is it judging others? Would that be the thing to avoid? I've asked myself that a lot. I've always felt quite bad about being so judgmental to other women, and I really tried hard not to be. I felt it was a wrong thing to do. It's like, it's wrong. It's morally wrong. It makes you a bad person. And to be a good person meant not to do that. So I try really hard to stop. And I found it really near impossible, to be honest. But when I did manage to reduce the amount of judgment, let's say, it also resulted in two things. One was I didn't use my discernment anymore, because I thought that when I was discerning, I was actually judging unfairly people. And so what happened, I got caught with quite unhealthy people along the way. And then number two, I was feeling miserable about myself all the time. Because not being aware of the mechanism, I was trying to remove the protective strategy without going deeper to the source. And we can't do that. If you try to remove the protective strategy without understanding what you're protecting and without opening new pathways as to what to do instead, uh, that is not helpful. That is not helpful. It can make you feel even worse. Um, so rather than beat yourself up, rather than be beating yourself up for how judgmental you can be, how I did, let's go a layer deeper. The one thing to avoid doing is comparing yourself to others. Comparing yourself to others. And why is that? Because I actually came across a t-shirt, a podcast where, it's funny, I had just written this episode just a few days ago, and this person in this podcast was saying how comparison is so important and it's such a good practice. And I was like, whoa, okay, I'm really getting it wrong here. What do you mean? Because when you compare yourself to others, then you can improve yourself. And that's all well and good. I get it. It depends, though, what wounds you carry. There's no truth, there's no truth. It's true. Like, if you're trying to improve on some skills, like, maybe. I really, really, really try to discourage comparing anyways, because we have different ways of learning. We have different ways of going about things. We have, like, even without the wounds, like, there's so many variables that really just look at someone else and how they're doing something, can it can still result in not feeling very good about yourself. So I'm not stating any truth here, and I'm open to a lot of aspects to the same topic. But when we talk about having wounds that come from having a narcissistic mother that has compared you and made you feel worse in every comparison, you were always the one that was not the good example within the comparison. Comparing yourself to others is continuing a very unhelpful pattern within your system. So how do we do that? First of all, we understand. Like, the first step is understanding that your mother did that to you. And so you learn to do that. It's not something that you just do. I just do that. I'm just very judgmental. That's not you. It's not you. And it's not necessary to your growth. It's not necessary for anything to continually look up at others and then compare yourself to others and use their success as a measure to your failure. Because when have you ever felt good comparing yourself to others? That's the key question. When you compare yourself, your story, your life, your looks, your anything to others, do you actually feel good? Probably not. And could it be, that's provocative possibly, but could it be that the only way you actually feel good in that scenario is when, after comparing yourself to others, you put them down, you find faults, you judge them, and then there you have a moment where you kind of feel good. You get some kind of kick out of that. And again, no judgment here. I mean, I've done it plenty. I come from a family that was the best sport. Like, that's what they were doing all the time. Looking at others, judging, comparing, judging, comparing. It was like, whoa, a broken record. I thought there was no other way to live, actually. Whenever a woman seemed to have what I felt I didn't, I would put her down. And not in her face. Often it wasn't even someone I knew in person, but I could still do that, just to avoid how I actually felt inside, which was horrible about myself. So how can we go about stopping this pattern of comparing ourselves to others? let's slow down for a moment on this, because that's important. Okay, we recognize the pattern, but then we need to figure out how do we stop doing that. First of all, we stop. We don't beat ourselves for it. We recognize it. We know where it comes from. Understanding. That's why understanding narcissism is so important, because when you understand where these patterns come from, that's not just purely your personality. You weren't born like that. You came into this world, and then your mother, for her own reasons, again, she wasn't born like that either, but she just brought her own wounds and her own trauma and her own shit, and she dumped it all on you unskillfully. And so now you are the one that has to break the cycle. You are the one that just is leaving the result of all of that. So first, it's important to say that this whole comparing yourself to other kind of stops naturally as a result of doing the work on a deep level. Because the more grounded you feel in yourself, the more you regain your identity, the more you open up to receive the love that is actually there for you. And so the less you will feel the need to protect that way anymore. That you won't feel the need to compare yourself to others. It's just, it kind of happens. It's not like you're trying to fix one thing specific. There's nothing to fix, as I tell you all the time. Here, we're not trying to fix anything. We're just trying to figure and understand where things came from, and then open up new ways of going about things that are more helpful for you, for your well-being, for your happiness. So it's not about fixing. But it kind of happens naturally. So naturally, you start comparing yourself to others way less, because you're feeling super fucking grounded in who you are. You're feeling good about yourself. And so why would you go comparing yourself to others? It just makes no sense. Okay? So it is about opening new pathways so that the old protective ones are not needed anymore. But there are also things you can start implementing straight away. And again, and not because you want to fix a bad behavior of judging, but because going about things like we just spoke about, the whole comparing yourself to other, and then going through the whole process of admiring, then projecting, then blah, blah, blah. It's not helpful. It's just not helpful. It doesn't make you feel good. It actually makes you feel worse and worse about yourself. So here we can implement a few things. Before the comparison, before we compare, whether we're aware that we're doing it or not, but before we do that, there's a moment that can be very brief when you actually feel admiration for someone. Okay, we spoke to that. So you feel this woman has something you would like to have. And so we slow down for a moment on this point. So before we get into, but I'm so bad because I don't have it, and judging ourselves or feeling crap about ourselves, there's a moment where it's just like, whoa, this woman is really good at knitting. I haven't the first idea how to knit, but this woman is awesome at it. So before I start beating myself up because I don't knit, there are things I can do. There are actions I can take following that impulse, that moment of admiration, okay, which is inspiration. So one thing you can do, the first thing, so there's 3 things actually we're going to talk about today that can be done when we feel that moment of admiration for someone. First, is it something you're interested in learning? That's the first question. So I see someone that is so amazing at knitting. Do I want to learn how to knit? Do I want to be that good? And I know that what can come in as the next wave is, even if you feel like you don't, what comes in as the next wave is that you don't feel like you have what it takes to become that. But okay, let's treat that voice for what it is. We know now that that's our mother's voice that is on, like our mother is sitting on our shoulder, whether she's in the room or not, whether she's dead or alive, but she's still sitting there on the shoulder going, you don't have what it takes to do that. Okay, so we know that. So that voice comes in and we go, okay, yeah, just be quiet for a moment. Is this something I really want to learn? And if it is something that you really want to learn, then what is the step to take to learn it? Whatever that is. You're coming on this podcast and you go, okay, here we're learning about how to get over this narcissistic mother wounding. We're relearning to connect with ourselves. We're relearning to be happy. This feels good. I want that. How do I what's the first step to do that? And if that voice in your head, your mother voice that is not yours, we know that's your mother voice, and it's understandable that it's there. It really gets there strong. You can go back on and listen to episode 12 when your inner critic has your narcissistic mother voice. That episode speaks specifically to that, so go back and listen to that. So the first thing you can do is, if you're interested in learning, you go about it. I'm interested, I'm looking at someone that can knit really well. I go, whoa, I really want to learn that. What's the first step? Do they have a course? This woman is so bloody good. It's from her I want to learn. So how? What do I have to do? Is there a course? Do I need to send her an email? Do I need to contact her? Do I need to go and buy the stuff that I need for this? Whatever is the first step, go and implement it. Take it. Go for it. But if you're like me and you couldn't care less about knitting, so it's not something you would like to learn, okay? That's okay too. So we're going to number 2. Option number 2 is, I don't want to learn that. I can see that this person is awesome at what she does, but I don't want to learn that. And that's okay, because we're not here to be everything. I mean, some things are for you, some things are not. Knitting is not for me. So that is where discerning comes in. Knowing what's actually something that you want to do and what's something that you don't. Because also that inadequacy wound, that feeling like we're not enough, can push us into want to be able to do everything. And I mean, that's not humanly possible. It's a lot of stress. There are things you really want to do and things that you're just doing because you think you have to. So let's drop those. We don't need to do those. So if you recognize that that's something you're not really wanting to do, but you have had that moment of admiration for this woman that is so good at her skill, the invitation is to practice acknowledging her. Like literally send her a message, an email, whatever, and just acknowledging what you've noticed. I've seen how amazing you are at this, and I wanted to tell you for no reason. You just wanted to tell her. It's a practice, because the more you do that, the more that other voice that wants to put that woman down, next thing to suppress and protect, is gonna have to be quiet. And it's very important that when you do that, so when you're reaching out, you don't add any comment that diminishes you within the same sentence. So, for example, you're so great at knitting, unlike me. You see that unlike me? We don't need that. You're so great at knitting, full stop. Or you could reach out and say something like, oh, I wish I was as good as you at. Well, that first of all, it's not true, because you've already decided that that's not something you want to learn. So you don't wish to be as good as her at that. And then it's diminishing you again, because it implies that you wish you would, but you're not able to intrinsically. So you see how that works. So those words we don't use. How you could go about it instead is, I want to honor and acknowledge your capacity to do such and such. Or I want to honor and acknowledge your beauty. Your whatever, you add that, you fill in the blank. I felt it in my heart and wanted to share it with you. Have a lovely day. Full stop. It's a pure acknowledgement without diminishing anyone. And I know this feels way out of your comfort zone to reach out and say that to someone, especially someone you don't even know. At least that's how it was for me. Especially when I so fully believed that I was a nobody compared to whoever the other woman was. So why would she even want to hear that from me? Trust me, it's always lovely. It's always lovely to hear someone acknowledging you like that without wanting anything in return. Because when you're not diminishing yourself in the same sentence, you're not asking for anything in return. You see, when you go and reach out to someone and go, oh, you're so good at that, unlike me, inside that inner child in you is asking for that person to go, oh no, come on, don't put yourself down. Which can leave the other person putting up her own protective barriers, going like, ooh, what is she wanting from me? This feels, they don't even know, they mightn't have the awareness, but they still feel, this just doesn't, this is not a clean interaction. There's something here that I'm not quite sure what it is, but I don't want to go there. Okay. Or they're nice and they just tell you, come on, don't put yourself down, but still it's just not clean. So when you just reach out to someone to purely acknowledge, to purely honor and acknowledge their capacity, and then you wish them a beautiful day and that's it, full stop, you don't want nothing, that is so wonderful to receive. And also the fact that it feels so uncomfortable tells you how much that is a super potent practice to do. When you have to go so much out of your comfort zone, usually it's something really potent that's gonna happen. The more you do it, the more you will become comfortable in doing it and in appreciating not only others but yourself. Because when you start acknowledging others so freely and you start expressing that admiration, it backfires in the good way. It starts becoming easier to acknowledge yourself. And you will be pleasantly surprised by the responses you might get. Which is not why we do it, of course, it's not. Because if we're doing it to get a response, again, we're getting back to the same mechanism and it's not helpful anymore. But still, I can't tell you that it's not true, because sometimes beautiful relationships bloom out of it. I've had that. I've reached out to women and went, wow, what you're doing with that thing is just so wonderful. I love it. And that has started connections, beautiful connections. I meant it and it worked like that. Now, there's also we don't need to go into that, but it does happen that people do that as just as a technique. That's not what I'm talking about, and that's just not on. And the more you get in tune, the more you start discerning, okay, this person is really coming from the heart doing this, and this person is just pretending. But that's not what we're talking about here. So yeah, when something that you realize it's wonderful and you admire, but you don't want to learn, you can just practice as an exercise. Make it a game to acknowledge that person and let her know you're acknowledging her. Message, email, phone call, whatever it is. If it's a person in person, someone, you could meet someone down the street. I've had that, actually just the other day, someone came up to myself and my family in the market square and was like, wow, I just have to stop you and tell you how wonderfully colorful family you are, because we do dress quite colorful, strong colors. We don't do it on purpose, but it happens. And so the four of us were all very colorful, and this woman thought that was amazing. She loved it, and she stopped and she just told us that, and then she went off on her day. That's beautiful. I mean, that's cool. She didn't go and, like me, I'm all dressed in black or whatever. No, she just acknowledged. So you can do it. It could happen on the street to someone face to face that you've never met before. But if you feel that moment, the bottom line is, if you feel that moment of admiring, go for it. Let them know. Only good can come out of it. The third thing you can do, and I'm gonna say that specifically, that is specific to social media. I want to use that as an example because that is a place where the comparison happens all the time, but it could happen also in real person life. Um, if you decide, so you've had that admiration, okay, and you decide it's not something you would like to learn, or maybe it is, but you still really feel like it's a true impossibility for you to learn it yet, for your system to go there at this moment. So and you might have even acknowledged the person, you might have even done the step 2, you might have even done that the option 2, that exercise, and sent an acknowledgement, and you might have even gotten a beautiful response, but still you are falling into comparing yourself with that person, and it results in making you feel not so good about yourself, like you're coming out of an interaction, whether it's in person or whether it's while you're following someone on a social media platform, and feeling worse when you come off that interaction. Okay, what we can do at this point is a detox, um, uh, which means stop interacting for a while. um, and that, yeah, of course, this is a little bit easier on social media, but not necessarily. Like sometimes even in person, you can say it, you can take a moment, you can look, for whatever I'm going through right now, I'm just gonna be busy for a while, so like I'll contact you back when I'm done whatever I have to do. You don't have to give justifications, but you can take space and time away from people that, not for their own, it's not their fault, it's not because they do that to you, but whatever that interaction triggers, comparison comes in, you feel worse about yourself, and that's not helpful for you. So you can do that. um I've had this happening to me a lot. I've noticed actually on social media in particular, that's something that happens. It was a pattern I had to recognize because it was very, very, very damaging for me personally. So when I want to do something, let's use the example of the podcast. I wanted to start this podcast. And you know how it works. You start looking up at people that are doing it, so you can see what works and what doesn't, which it's okay. Like, again, this is part of taking the steps to learn, okay? But when you do that, then your feed gets inundated by people that are doing it, and they're of course doing it successfully, because they wouldn't be putting it on social media if it was not a success. or at least that's what they're trying to make us believe, that it is a success all the time. And when that happens, what starts happening inside of me, I've recognized, is I feel really overwhelmed by the amount of people that seem to be doing it really great, especially if they're women. And I start comparing, and before I've even started on the podcast, I'm already feeling like it's gonna fail, because all of these people have so much that I don't have, and I'm never gonna have it. And that's really not helpful. So what I do in when I want to do something new, and I did it with the podcast, I did it with my writing, I did it with a lot of different things, I actually unfollow, like literally clear my feed of those people. And it's not because I have anything against those people, but it's because it's triggering that response. And in some cases, I've yet to figure out how to get over that response when it gets triggered. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of work on my part. So that way I can just do a detox and then come back to it. If I want to reconnect with some of the people, I can, and I've done it. But I've detoxed for a while, and I'm back to be able to see them for who they actually are, and they're not a threat to me. They're not. They're just people doing their things, and they're doing them well, and that's good for them, good on them, but it has nothing to do with me. Okay, can you see how that works? So in good measure, it can be a good practice to observe what others are doing that works and that doesn't. But if it takes the wind out of your sails altogether, triggering the who am I to do this? Or clearly these people are so much better than me and so much more prepared than I will ever be, blah, blah, blah. Yet again, that's your mother's voice in your head. It has nothing to do with those people, but that triggers it. Okay, so clear your feed, unfollow, take a moment, knock off your phone altogether and just take a detox from social media altogether. When the whole comparison thing is quite a pattern for you, that can also be a really good thing, detoxing from that sort of those platforms where comparison is the main thing that happens. I know that can sound a little bit extreme. You don't have to do that, but take a good look at who you're following and just be, is this helpful for me? Like ultimately, when you are doing something like that, when you're following people on social media, and when you're looking at what they're doing, how do you feel when you when you're done with that interaction? If you're feeling really good and inspired, that's okay. But then that was a good interaction. But if you're feeling like you're never gonna achieve anything in life and you're worthless and you're not enough, or you mightn't even have those words to describe it yet, you might just feel horrible, that's it, and you don't even know why, well then something needs to be done about it. We live in a society where comparing ourselves to others is a very normal practice. As we said, it's a lot easier to be in a bunch of women bitching about other women, and because that comparison is such an ingrained thing that everyone is expecting that that's happening, and then the judgment becomes like the next natural step. And social media platforms are the worst place for that. And everyone on those platforms, anyone wants to look their best. I mean, they're not gonna put horrible photos of themselves. They're not gonna put, oh, I've tried to do this podcast, but I got, like it happens. Oh, I've put out an episode and all of a sudden my listens are down of 20%. Like, they don't put that. They'll only tell you when they've put out an episode and their listens have shot up. Or that's just how it works. So and sometimes it is tricky to know if you're even doing it. I get it. I would swear blindly I wasn't comparing myself to others, but I was feeling like crap. And yet I would say no, I don't do that. I never do that. I'm just, that person is so good and I'm only admiring, or the whole judging and taking them down. But I would swear that no, I wasn't, because I was comparing myself to them, because I was not aware. So one way to tell if you are is how you actually feel after having interacted with such platform. As I said, if you're feeling really good. If you are feeling like you're overall learning and growing, that's wonderful. But if you're feeling down and very critical about yourself and more lonely as a result, if you're feeling your mother was right all along and you don't have what it takes, if you're feeling hopeless, then you are indeed comparing yourself to others, and that's happening in a dynamic in a way that is not helpful. I just want to remind you very much that you are you. Your story is your story. And what you experienced and what you're experiencing is impossible to judge, because it is your experience. There's no right or wrong. It's only your experience. It's unjudgeable by anyone else. Even your mother. You are an amazing human being on a journey that no one has the right to comment on. And if they do comment, because they will, it means they also have stories that you don't know, and those stories bring them to do that, to comment and compare and judge and put you down. So leave them to it. That's their life, that's their story, but you don't need to take any of that in your own life. Who knows how much crap went on in your mother's life to have her feel it was okay to put you down all the time. It means nothing about you. That's her story. And again, that's not to justify, but it's to understand that that's what happens. So how you go about this? Number one, you can take the first step. If you want to learn what this person that you find so amazing has, take the first step, whatever that is. Listen to the episode 12 about your mother, your inner critic having your mother's voice, and see, use whatever helpful tools are in that episode to help with that voice of your mother on your shoulder that tells you you're not going to be able to do it, and take the first step, whatever that is, to learn that, to acquire that skill that you so want. A second option is you don't want to learn it, that's okay. Send her an acknowledgement, send that person an acknowledgement from your heart that does not involve putting yourself down in the same sentence. And option number 3, even if you've tried all the above, you're still feeling not so good, detox. Take a moment to detox. Make space. And remember that you have the potential to be, do, learn, have anything you truly want. And I know it is challenging to believe that, and that is why you need to hear it. That is why we are here. Whatever about you not believing it, I really do believe it. I believe it as so much that I believe it for you as well. I really believe that you can be, do, learn, and have everything you truly want. And I also believe at the same time that you are absolutely perfect as you are right now. And I know who am I to say that? I mean, I don't even know you in person. I'm no one in particular, but I have been through it. I have felt like the smallest person in the world so much of my life. And I still struggle with it often, So I truly get how it feels. And I know how unhelpful it is comparing myself to others. It has been unhelpful all my life, and I know how unhelpful that is for you. Your mother used comparison to belittle you, diminish you, put you down, and it's time to break the cycle. That's it. Enough of that. And it doesn't happen all at once. And if you end up comparing and judging as a result of what you've been through, you're not a bad person for that. You're just dealing with what you've been through. My intention with this episode is to shine the light on the mechanism and support you in becoming aware of the pattern, so that you can start being inspired by other women and grow into yourself more and more, fulfilling your potential in the best way for you. And so you can, from that place, inspire others in the same way. You don't know what an incredible effect can a simple acknowledgement have on another until you give them one. I know in the process of starting this podcast, when I started receiving messages from women that I've never met before in my life, that just drop me a message and they go, look, I'm here listening to your episode, and I just wanted to tell you how incredible and impactful and healing this is for me. Thank you, have a good day. It's like, wow, that really helps, So you don't know what effect you're having, how inspiring you're actually being for others when you do that. And receiving a message like that also inspire the person that receives it to maybe do that for someone else. Kind of pay forward sort of a way. And this is what we do in Reclaim Your Fullness Women's Circle. This is at the core of what we practice, inspiring each other, holding each other, and also accepting that judgment can come up. Because they will. Because when you are, and that's I'm speaking to those of you who, like me, fear going into a bunch of women because you're gonna be bitterly judged because you judge. So if you do that, they're gonna do that. That does happen, That's just the way it is. It's part of the shadow work. But when the judgment comes up, what we practice is, in a very safe way. There are safe ways to do that, which I won't go into right now, but we do that in a really safe manner. We speak those judgments so they come out of the shadow, they come out of the background, and we shine the light on them. And in that way, we are making it a super safe environment for all the women involved. And we break the pattern. That's the key. That's why healing this type of wounds happens within relating with other women. Because by doing that, you break the pattern of projecting onto others. And that leaves everyone within the container feeling seen, safe, and loved. And that's really key to how these circles are done. And I know that does not happen in every women's circle. I spoke a lot about the fact that I've experienced amazing ones where I've was blessed with incredible mentors. I've had great healing experiences and created beautiful connections with the women that were involved in those circles, and friendships that still are lasting after years. But I've also had the other experience of groups of women where, yeah, it's a women's circle, but it's like, whoa. It's like it's like a chicken coop of judgment. And it's not spoken, and it's all nicey nice at the front, but it's horrendous what goes on behind. So I have experienced that too. And because I have experienced that, I'm really conscious of not replicating that. So that's where we create a container that is safe, and we work through those shadow aspects so that we don't project on others, and we break the pattern, and everyone feels seen, safe, and loved. Yeah, so that's it for today. Again, if you want to know more about the circles, as I said, the link is in the description. If you want to reach out, you can reach out and ask me more questions about it. Send me an email. That's super welcome. And have a beautiful week. Bye for now.